Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, helping you navigate home care and senior residences.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, home care, and the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sorota, a clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief and loss.
Coming up on today's show, we're celebrating our 5-year anniversary and 250th show, Corey. So join us to hear some of the most memorable moments with some of our most memorable guests.
It is hard to believe that we are here, and please don't make us sound so old. Well, I want to say that, honestly, in the spirit of Life Unrehearsed, we have had some absolutely inspirational stories, how these families have turned their tragedies into supporting others in need. We've heard heart-wrenching stories. We've heard life-altering stories. We've heard about entrepreneurs taking lemons and making lemonade, and we've heard about very creative initiatives. I feel so privileged to have accompanied thank you, and all of the people that have come on our show.
Really, it has been. It's been a fun ride. We really want to thank our listeners. A lot of the ideas come from our listeners as well on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page. And Corey, it has been a great 5-year run. We're very proud of it. We've had so many great guests, so many Life Unrehearsed stories. And we're going to play a few clips shortly, and then we're going to continue with some of those clips towards the end of the show at around 3:50. So, you know what? We have enough time for about 5 or 6 clips, right, Corey? But the hardest part of preparing this show today was to decide which clips to choose because, during our 5 years, we've interviewed over 300 guests, all of them amazing and some so inspiring. Some of mine personally that stand out are the many personal stories of the difficult times that people face, the resilience, the perseverance. Corey, we've handled everything, right? Alzheimer's, many cancer survivors, ICU nurses, organ transplant recipients, autism, cystic fibrosis, mental health. We've tackled it all on Life Unrehearsed. Just to, specific names, as you know, Corey, I like my sports, so I will occasionally have some of our sports figures, and I've been blessed, and you too as well, to talk to people like Anthony Calvillo, Theo Fleury with some of his challenges, Chris Nyland, some refs, Kerry Fraser and Wally Harris talking about the time in Boston when they threw beer bottles at the time. Actually, they were on the ice at the Gardens. Dick Irvin we had on, and PK Subban's dad. So there's some of the sports guys. I'll never forget the interview with Sophie Gregoire Trudeau. This is going back almost 5 years ago. And it was a very emotional interview when we asked her about her legacy, and she actually broke down in tears during that interview. Very emotional. So those are some of the ones that stand out for me, Corey. Any others for you?
It probably ranges from the personal, literally the big joke in my house is if I meet you for 30 seconds, you're coming on the show. Because whether I walked into a restaurant or I walked into a doctor's office or I walked into a camp situation, and when I meet you and I hear people's stories, which I find so fascinating, I got to interview you.
That's funny.
Every single time I speak. So
you reach out, hey, Matt, we got one.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm very proud of the Helping Moms and Dads segments where we're helping seniors and sandwich generation, the adult children. We've addressed a ton of things there. So let's get right into it and play a couple of our favorite clips. We're going to begin with one of my most memorable interviews. I mentioned I'm a hockey guy, a sports guy. And the interview was with the one and only Phil Esposito. Although he played for the Big Bad Bruins, I always looked up to him, and it was primarily because of the Canada-Russia series in 1972. And maybe just to recap for all the young uns, that's 50 years ago already, believe it or not. They were in Russia. They had to win game 6, 7, and 8. And it came down to the last game, game 8, to win the series. They were down 2 goals going into the third period. And I asked them about what it was like in that locker room with all these superstars and down 2 goals.
Well, there were some guys with their heads down, no doubt about it, but there were a lot of positive guys too. Serge Savard was positive. I remember Serge and Paul Henderson because they were sitting closer to me. And I remember saying, guys, we got these guys. We got them. we got them. We play our game this period, we'll get them. And I remember Serge saying something to Kenny Dryden. And if you remember correctly, I thought Dryden was outstanding in that third period. He didn't have a particularly good series because the Russians went side to side, and Kenny was more a straight up and down guy. But in that third period, boy, he came through big time.
And talk about pressure. You've got 16 million Canadians watching on TV, the biggest audience by far. And this is at a time when Canada's population was just shy of 22 million. The number stood for almost 40 years.
Really?
And Phil
I didn't know that. I didn't know there were that many people watching.
16 out of 22. Thank goodness you didn't know in between those periods, because you got on the ice. You promptly go and score a goal pretty quick yourself. Make it 5-4. You assist on Cormier's goal with 7 minutes to go. It's 5-5. And, of course, all Canadians know about the last 34 seconds when you assisted on Paul Henderson's winning goal to take it all. You were a one-man wrecking crew. I heard you didn't even get off the ice or didn't want to.
Well, I didn't want to. There's no doubt about that. I felt after the fact, maybe when I got back to Boston, I felt, God, I guess I was kind of selfish, and I knew it, but I just had this in me that I trusted myself so much that we were going to win, and I wanted to make sure, and I just did. I mean, what made Paul Henderson yell in that last minute or so at Pete Mahovlich to come off the ice so that he could get on? It wasn't his shift or anything. What made him do that? You talk about destiny. You talk about God and the Lord helping us. There's no doubt about it, because it turned out to be society against society, capitalism versus communism. And I'll take capitalism every damn time.
So appropriate, especially these days with Russia. So there was Phil Esposito. Corey, which one do you have?
Well, interestingly enough, although there are many, my first show happens to be one of my most special shows. And if I can get through this without crying, it'll be a miracle. My very dear colleague and very dear friend, Theresa Muller, was our first guest when I took the show from Stephanie Erickson as a co-host. And we asked Theresa Muller, who was at the time the director of the West Island Palliative Care, which is now aptly named Theresa Muller Palliative Care Residence. We asked Theresa how she defined palliative care, and this is what she had to say.
And palliative care really is about improving the quality of life of our patients and their families, not just at the end of life, but also throughout their illness. So we've been really, really blessed with just having such a great number of staff that work with us.
So you touched on what is palliative care and what you do,
right.
But I think our listeners would probably benefit from understanding a little more about the support that you do offer to families and how you help the patients themselves.
I think the most important thing that we do is that when a patient comes through our doors with their families, the family is allowed once again to be a family member. They've often been caregivers. They've also often been the one who has been spending the days and nights with that person and being exhausted and overwhelmed. And when they walk through the doors, they can be a family member again. So they can be the wife, the husband, the child. And that's really important. So we do our very, very best to work with the families and the patients by offering support in many forms, not just physical management of symptoms, but emotional, spiritual, psychological, and it's very important that we give that service to both the patient and the families.
Corey, that was one of our most heartfelt interviews with Theresa Muller. God rest her soul. With the Theresa Muller Palliative Care Residence, we met with her husband last week, Gavin. You and I, and so blessed to be with Gavin.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, helping you navigate home care and senior residences.
And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt Del Vecchio, along with my co-host Corey Sirota. And yes, we are celebrating. In fact, we're celebrating our 5 years on air with our 250th show today. And we're talking about some of our most memorable moments. Now, Corey, it's your turn. Who comes to mind for you?
So it's a bit of nepotism, but you'll hear why. In September 2018, we interviewed a young woman by the name of Justine Frankel. Her topic was plus-size modeling. She spoke so well, so eloquently, not like I am speaking right now, so eloquently. And, she happens to be my daughter, so it was a proud mom moment. We began the interview by asking, what is, in fact, plus-size modeling? And this is what she had to say.
I went through a very rough patch in my young adult life, and when that rough patch ended, I really wanted to start advocating for body positivity and loving oneself, regardless of what other people think and what other people want you to be. I realized that you can't impress everyone and you can't please everyone, so why not just please yourself? And I had a friend who had been working with a certain photographer, and I said, if you ever need someone plus size, I'd love to be in front of the camera, of course. And she asked him, and he was very interested. I did my first photo shoot just for fun. He said, the camera loves you. You should be doing this more often. And that's how it all started.
Amazing.
So it's so nice. It's really encouraging. But I have to ask you, how would you define plus size modeling?
Well, it's a funny term, plus size modeling. I define it the same way as I define modeling. Modeling is modeling. I just have a better diet and better food.
You can see why I love her and love her answers. So after that, I asked Justine what message she is trying to get out there, and this is what she had to say.
It started off really as a movement to help women that were plus size, but now it's gone so far from that because body positivity is really your body, and whoever you are, male, female, regardless of race, regardless of size, like I always say. And I mean, people who have physical handicaps, people who have mental handicaps, everyone, it's about really being positive and loving who you are and using that as a starting point. Like I had said before, it's really about loving yourself and then choosing what you want to do with that love. And loving yourself doesn't necessarily mean wanting to change your body, and it doesn't necessarily mean not wanting to change your body. You can want to lose that weight. You can do it. Go for it. But just know that if you do lose the weight, if you don't lose the weight, if you do change whatever, you're still worthy of love. You're still beautiful.
So true, Corey. I understand being a proud mom at Justine was just fantastic.
What about you, Matt? There's so many other heartwarming stories. So.
There are, we wanted to play. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed, by the way. We are celebrating 5 years on air with our 250th show, and we wanted to put some of the more memorable interviews or clips, at least. And one of mine, by far, was talking about a survivor from the tragic Humboldt Broncos bus crash in Saskatchewan that many of us are aware of. Just to give a little recap, it was a tragic event on April 6th, 2018, almost 4 years ago already, when the bus carrying the Humboldt Broncos hockey team collided with the truck. 16 people were killed and 13 people survived. One of those survivors was Caleb Dahlgren. We were very fortunate to have Caleb as our guest 3 years after the horrific crash, where he felt comfortable enough to talk about it publicly. In the interview, he's in his early 20s. Just to give you an example of some of the injuries he personally faced: fractured skull, severe brain injury, broken neck, broken back, puncture wound. He had imprinted on the side of his face seat 5C, and he was in row 12. So we asked him, after all of that, how can he possibly cope with such a tragedy? And we asked him for his words of advice for those that have experienced trauma.
Some of the things that I really took away was to put myself in the shoes of the other ones who aren't here. And I think that's such a hard concept for people to grasp. But for me, that was one of the big things. Because if I wasn't here, how would I want the survivors to live their life? If I passed away, how would I want my family and my friends to live their life? I want them to be happy, to follow their dreams and passions, and to live life to the fullest, and to honor me, but still to do the things they want to do and remember me, but make their life fun and enjoy the little things and don't sweat the little things. And so for me, that's what I wanted if I wasn't here, and that's what I try to live by. And then also another thing is, what can I control? And I was to focus on the things that I can control. And that was another huge thing for me, was I couldn't control this crash. I couldn't control the semi-driver. I couldn't control my injuries. I couldn't even control who was here and who wasn't here. All I could control was my attitude, my perspective, how I wanted to move forward from this, also how I wanted to live my life and honor those who aren't here, and even just how I was going to move forward physically, mentally, emotionally. What I want this to be, that I want this to be the thing that made my life horrible or something that I can turn into something positive.
Unbelievable. What a well-spoken young man. So we heard from Justine, who is also a well-spoken young woman. Then we have Caleb, well-spoken. And these are real life unrehearsed issues. I also, on the same vein, had always a special place in my heart for an early interview we did with Ray and Judy. Ray has Parkinson's, and they spoke about living with Parkinson's disease. And I asked them, what did they find most challenging? What aspect about living with Parkinson's disease could they describe? And this is what they had to say.
Now, on the challenging side of things, bringing it right back to the day-to-day activities, what would you say that are some of the more difficult things that you have to cope with on a day-to-day basis?
I find large multi-step tasks are daunting. Judy constantly reminds me that I have to take one step at a time and look at it that way.
Taking it in pieces and instead of looking at the big picture, which makes a lot of sense and makes it a little easier to navigate for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
On my part, I think Ray and I were talking earlier, and it's like living with another person, in a sense that Parkinson's is always part of your life. I'm always saying to Ray, did you have your pill? When's your next pill? Do you want to have a nap? And Parkinson's just becomes that other person in the room.
Third person in the room.
Yeah. And you also have to change how you plan your activities, in the sense that you can't go shopping and then go out to eat and then go visit a friend and then do the things you would hope to do. You can't just walk out of the door and have that kind of freedom. You have to plan your day a little more carefully.
What an interview, Corey. I'll never forget it, because this was in the time when we were in studio and they were both there, and it was very emotional. Ray and Judy, just the absolute best. That's about it on our 5-year anniversary show, Corey, here on Life Unrehearsed. What do we have coming up next week?
Next week, we are going to talk about, after discovering she had throat cancer, Tanya Toledano created a product to cover her scars that is not only practical, but fashionable as well. You will not believe that. And the author of the book, If You Love Them, Leave Them a List, will explain why it's integral that you do so.
Yeah, and we want to thank you for tuning in to Life Unrehearsed and celebrating our 5 years with us. As a reminder, for all your inquiries or assistance with navigating home care, seniors' residences, or downsizing, be my pleasure to help. Our services are completely free. Call me at Lianas Senior Transition Support, or look us up under lianasservices.com. Many thanks to our technical producer, and I want to do a special shout-out for Nicole. This was one of her most edited, a lot of work behind the scenes. She found out last night that she was going to be our technical producer. Nicole, big thumbs up. Thank you for celebrating with us. And you can listen to Life Unrehearsed here on CJAD 800 every Saturday at 3 p.m.